an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the 5th season, The Broken Earth, Book 1, Chapters 17 and 18, Damaya in Finality, and You Discover Wonders Down Below. In these chapters, surprise, motherfucker, it turns out that Damaya and Syenite are the same motherfucking person. We did a Westworld on this bitch. Did not see that coming. Fucking should have seen it coming. Why should I have, though? I really shouldn't. That's not my fault. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Megan Tolentino for commissioning this episode. It has been so long since I read the last few. I think it's been the last episode that I did on 5th season was 2018, actually. I think it's been, there haven't been any this year. And I had to go back and reread some of the previous chapters, just skim them to refamiliarize myself with what was going on with the story. And, the Damaya being, information on Syenite's childhood and background and origin story is just not something that I saw coming at all, which now makes me very suspicious of the You chapters in which we are watching. I believe her name is Esun. Makes me go is Esun Syenite 50 years later? What's going on here? I don't think so. I don't think that they would do that trick again. But I definitely had a moment of just being you know how that is. It's very easy once somebody has twisted on you one time for you to start getting paranoid and think everything is a twist. So I don't know what to make of this, and that's fine. I just want you all to be clear that when I start to discuss this, I've got no theories, of nothing that's clearly formed in my head at all. It's all not just wild speculation based on simple descriptions and what I know to be true of this universe, but there's also to be considered that I don't fully understand how Orogenes works in this universe either. So a lot of the theories that I have, I'm not sure are possible. I'm not sure what the restrictions are and are not yet, because I'm not even sure that the author quite knows the answers to that yet this early on. I don't know how strictly she has put down a set of rules for herself to follow, because it can be very limiting to do that. So there can be times where an author either doesn't put down rules because they don't want rules. They flat out want to be able to just do whatever they want, which, works in ways and doesn't in others. They don't make rules because they're not entirely sure until a second or third book what they want their parameters to be. They don't set down rules because they don't want their readers to know what the rules are. And maybe they don't set them down because they know what they are, but they don't want their magic user to know what they are. And for them to bump up against problems and so they're keeping that information away from their characters as much as the reader. So I'm not sure which this is, but I assume I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and say that she has the rules clearly in mind in her own head, and that she is just keeping them from her character and thus from us. This is such a strange section. So, all right, I'm going to jump right into Damaya in Finality. And I'm just going to read the opening of this because I feel like it really sets the tone very well. Things change. There is an order to life in the fulcrum, but the world is never still. A year passes. After Crack disappears, Mexique never speaks to Damaya again. When he sees her in the corridors or after inspection, he simply turns away. If he catches her looking at him, he scowls. He doesn't catch her often, though, because she doesn't look at him often. She doesn't mind that he hates her. He was only a potential friend anyway. She knows better now than to want such a thing or to believe that she will ever deserve one. Friends do not exist. The fulcrum is not a school. Grits are not children. Orogenes are not people. Weapons have no need of friends. Still, it's hard, because without friends, she's bored. The instructors have taught her to read as her parents did not, but she can only do so much of that before the words start to flip and jitter on the page like pebbles during a shake. The library doesn't have a lot of books that are just for fun and not utilitarian anyway. Weapons do not need fun either. She's only allowed to practice her orogeny during applied, and even though she sometimes lies in her bunk and imagines the lessons over again for extra practice, and Orogene's power is in her focus after all, there's only so much of that she can do too. So to occupy her free hour, and any other hour when she isn't busy or sleeping, she wanders around the fulcrum. No one stops Grits from doing this. No one guards the Grit dormitory during free hour or afterwards. The instructors do not enforce a curfew. Free hour can be free night if a Grit's willing to struggle through the next day sleepy. Nor do the adults do anything to prevent the Grits from leaving the building. Any child caught in the ring garden, which is off limits to the unringed, or approaching the gates that lead out of the fulcrum will have to answer to the seniors. But anything less, and the sanctions will be mild, bearable, the usual punishment befitting the crime. That's it. So, this is really interesting to me. First of all, based on what we know in the fulcrum, the fact that Grits are not prevented from wandering around where they feel like is shocking. Is that just me? That's really, really surprising that they're allowed any sort of freedom at all. And the fact that she is being not only allowed to explore where she wants, but later she's got like a backpack and a lantern, and it's very clear she's going into like an abandoned part of the fulcrum. Nobody minds at all. And I was totally taken off guard by that. Her being able to do this openly in her free time is just, it's completely the antithesis of what I expected. And I don't know what to make of it. I really don't. The only thing I can think, I almost knocked my tea over, oh my goodness. The only thing that I can think is that it has something to do with the voice later coming out of that woman's mouth asking if she was being called to it. And that maybe they're allowing them to roam freely because it's a test to see who gets summoned by this thing. What's this thing? Why? The mysterious socket, of course. I don't even know. Like, it doesn't seem, though, like her, what is it, Shala? Forgot his name already, her guardian. But it doesn't seem that he is approving of the voice coming out of this woman's mouth, asking if it was calling to you. So I don't think that I don't feel like he would have reacted that way if this is part of their overall mission to test Orogenes or Grits and see if they get attracted to this thing. I feel like her talking like that would be part of the plan. I don't, okay, so I'm going to continue reading. I'm not like, I just wanted to read you that first chapter and everything, but she goes around and around through all of the like different areas where there are people, but then she finds that the main, which is the building at the core of the fulcrum complex, that this is the one that she finds the most interesting. And she realizes eventually that there is another one underneath the first one that's basically abandoned. There are wings that have fallen into disuse because the fulcrum is larger than it needs to be, or so Damaya's instructors have told her when she asked them about this. No one knew how many Orogenes there were in the world before the fulcrum was built, or perhaps the builders thought that more Orogenes would survive childhood to be brought here than has proven over time. Regardless, the first time Damaya pushes open a conspicuous-looking door that no one seems to be using and finds a dark, empty hallway beyond it, she is instantly intrigued. It's way too dark, so this is why she winds up having to go back and get a lantern. But like I said, nobody stops her, which was just shocking to me. Also, I want to mention her description of what it's like to be around a guardian. Now and again, Damaya sees burgundy uniforms amid the clusters of black, and when she does, she turns the other way. Not out of fear. They probably see her, but they don't bother her because she's not doing anything she's been told not to do. It is as Shafa told her. Shafa, that's her guardian's name. One need only fear guardians in specific, limited circumstances. She avoids them, however, because as she grows more skilled, she begins to notice a strange sensation whenever she's in a guardian's presence. It is a buzzy feeling, a jagged and acrid sort of thing, something more heard and tasted than sensed. She does not understand it, but she notices that she is not the only Orogene to give the Guardians a wide berth. So that is fascinating to me, and I feel like that has to do with the whatever the implantation is at the base of their brainstem. I am surprised, though, that it's described as something more heard and tasted than sensed, though, because I thought that it would be tacked directly into their sesapine, if that's what they're called. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right, because it's apparently an invented word, but it's a convincing enough invented word that I thought it was a real word that I just simply didn't know. But yeah, I don't know what to make of this vibe. I feel like it has to be like something to do with the connection between Grits and Guardians, but I don't really know how that would work. And I will get to the detailed description of that a little bit later on. We get some, her exploring and all of the things that she finds. And I kept waiting for her to discover something horrible, but it's really just abandoned rooms with all kinds of weird stuff in them. Long, elegant dresses in the closets, dry rotted, toys meant for toddlers, jewelry that her mother would have salivated to wear. Which, this is all really surprising. Rooms full of plush, ornate chairs arranged in a circle to face each other. Why, she can only imagine. A room she does not understand until later, after her explorations have taken her into the buildings of the fulcrum that are dedicated to research. Then she knows what she has found is a kind of laboratory, with strange containers and contraptions that she eventually learns are used for analysis of energy and manipulation of chemicals. Perhaps geomists did not deign to study orogeny, and Orogenes are left to do that for themselves too? She can only guess. So this feels like this section of the fulcrum had been a home. Like that this was, I don't want to say a whole other type of school, but with the chairs in a circle, it certainly feels like there was some sort of community that was they were having meetings. I don't know if it's in the same vein, if it's meetings that are like business, maybe it's meetings amongst Guardians rather than Orogenes, but I can't imagine why they would just fall out of use, and yet remain open for people to explore. That's the part that I just keep coming back to, that this, I keep wanting there to be a secret here. And eventually, don't get me wrong, she comes across a fucking secret. But it's so, interesting. I just had a thought. Later on, when we're in Esun's chapter, our chapter, she realizes that the abandoned town above the city that's inside of a crystal, which is the coolest fucking thing ever, she realizes that that town is the barrier, that it's meant to distract people and think that there is nothing more to find. And maybe that's what these abandoned rooms are. Maybe they're supposed to be a means of satisfying the curiosity of roaming grit children while keeping safe the deeper secret, which she winds up finding in the end anyway. I'm wondering if that's a theme. Because I kept being like, if there is something secret here, she's going to find it. And that feels very counterintuitive. And they would be worried about that. So they wouldn't leave this open. But I couldn't figure, okay, maybe that's what it is. Okay. So then we get to the part where this other girl sneaks into the crew. Her name is Binoff, and Binoff is not a grit. She is very convincingly disguised as a grit, but she actually doesn't have any origin powers. And she is here because, and this is really weird and suspicious, and I'm dying to know who Binoff is. I feel like there's, like, either we find out later that Binoff was killed immediately following this, or Binoff grows up to be somebody powerful who, like, knows something and is keeping it to herself for whatever reason. So she asks Damaya, I'm not going to stay and I'm not going to get you in trouble. I just need to know, have you seen anything weird around here somewhere? Damaya stares at her again, and Binoff grimaces. A place with a shape, sort of. A thing that... She makes a series of complicated gestures, apparently trying to pantomime what she means. It is completely nonsensical. Except it isn't. Not entirely. The fulcrum is circular. Damaya knows this, even though she can only get a sense of it when she and the other grits transit the ring garden. The black star looms to the west of the fulcrum's grounds, and to the north Damaya has seen a cluster of buildings tall enough to peek over the obsidian walls. She often wonders what the inhabitants of those buildings think, looking down on Damaya and her kind from their lofty windows and rooftops. But more significantly, Maine is circular too. Almost. Damaya has wandered its dark hallways often enough by now, with only a lantern and her fingers and Cecipine to guide her, that when she sees Binoff make a hexagonal shape with her hands, she knows at once what the strange girl means. See, Maine's walls and corridors aren't wide enough to account for all the space the building occupies. The building's roof covers an area at its heart into which its working and walking spaces do not extend. There must be a huge empty chamber within. Courtyard, maybe, or a theater, though there are other theaters in the fulcrum. Damaya has found the walls around this space and followed them, and they are not circular. There are planes and angles, 6 of each. But if there's a door that opens into this hexagonal central room, it isn't anywhere in the unused wings, not that she's found yet. A room without doors, Damaya murmurs without thinking. It's what she started calling the unseen chamber in her head on the day she realized it must exist. And Binoff inhales and leans forward. Yes, yes! Is that what it's called? Is it in that big building at the center of the Fulcrum complex? That's where I thought it might be. Yes. So it turns out Binoff's name is Leadership Eumenes. Every time I say Eumenes, it sounds wrong. But she realizes, so, like, for a second, she doesn't give that name any credence. Anyone whose leadership before being taken by the Guardians isn't anymore. But then intuition turns a key and makes various clues click together, and Damaya realizes Binoff is not expressing a misplaced loyalty to a social convention that no longer applies. It does apply to Binoff, because Binoff is not an Orogen. And she's not just any still. She's a leader, and she's from Eumenes, which makes her a child of one of the most powerful families in the stillness. And she has snuck into the fulcrum pretending to be an Orogen. Fascinating. Binoff What's your deal? Where are you going? What are you doing? Why are you sneaking in here? How do you know what to look for? She says something about how it was left out of history, and that's all well and good, but she knows it's a hexagon. Like, how does she know these specifics? So they decide to go and explore this place together. And the doorway is hidden, like, behind a false back of a seemingly, I don't want to say abandoned office, but just a lesser used office. And the whole way that they're traveling together to, like, find this place, Damaya is really struggling because Benoff, in her opinion, is too casual and cavalier. Obviously, somebody who has never had to be afraid of anything. She just can't wrap her head around the danger that Damaya is putting herself in by doing this. And to be honest, it's considerably less danger than I might otherwise have thought, since I now know that everybody is allowed to go wherever. So I can't help but wonder how much danger they're actually in doing this before everything seems to go left with this woman kind of like short-circuiting. And Binoff thinks the same thing. I keep thinking everyone's going to notice me, but instead almost no one's paying any attention, even though we're the only kids out here. Damaya shrugs and keeps walking. You'd think someone would stop us and ask questions or something. We could be doing something unsafe. Damaya shakes her head. If one of us gets hurt and someone finds us before we bleed out, they'll take us to the hospital. That's nice, says Binoff, but maybe it's a better idea to stop kids before they do things that might get them hurt. Damaya stops in the middle of the lawn path and turns to Binoff. We aren't kids, she says, annoyed. Binoff blinks. We're grits. Imperial Orogenes in training. That's what you look like, so that's what everyone assumes you are. Nobody gives a damn whether a couple of Orogenes get hurt. Binoff is staring at her. Oh. And you're talking too much. Grits don't. We only relax in the dorms and only where there are no instructors around. If you're going to pretend to be one of us, get it right. So, yeah, this is interesting because there's obviously the racial parallels here of being an Orogene and being black and the considerations of like representing your entire race and all of the, you know, but the difference is obviously that Orogenes you can't tell by looking. So you have to go by the social signals of their dress. And so it's sort of like somebody, you know, the comparison to suddenly being able to step into black skin and walk down the street and being surprised that you're being looked at and treated differently than you normally are. That's where Binoff is. She doesn't understand the significance of this yet because she doesn't really understand how grits do not matter at all. She has never experienced not mattering, you know? So for her, she's just like, well, what the fuck? And that's a bummer, man. You know, so they find this doorway finally. That's like behind, like I said, the back of this closet door. And let's see. Oh, here it is. The room beyond is indeed someone's office. There's a desk and 2 high-backed chairs, and bookcases line the walls. The desk is bigger than most. The chair is more elaborate. Whoever works here is someone important. It is jarring for Damaya to see an office that's still in use after so many months of seeing the disused offices of the old wings. There's no dust, and the lanterns are already lit, though low wick. So strange. So this is where they, let's see. Oh, yeah. It's a brick. That's right. That they pull out. And there's a latch underneath that they open. And they go in. And I'm trying to find the exact spot I want. I'm sorry, guys. Oh, right. Here it is. I want to read you what Binoff is saying. There's something, an artifact, at the heart of the fulcrum. What kind of artifact? I'm not sure. I'm really not. All I know is that something's missing from history. There's a hole, a gap. What? in history. You know, the stuff the tutors teach you about how Orogenes was founded? There was a season, the one right before the empire was founded, was wandering, when north suddenly shifted and crops failed because birds and bugs couldn't find them. After that, warlords took over in most areas, which is what always used to happen after a season. There was nothing but stone lore to guide people then, and rumors and superstition, and it was because of rumors that no one settled in this region for a really long time. Orogenes was the perfect place for a city. Good weather, in the middle of a plate, water but nowhere near the ocean, all that. But people were afraid of this place, and had been for ages, because there was something here. Damaya's never heard anything like this. What? Binoff looks annoyed. That's what I'm trying to find out! That's what's missing. Imperial history takes over after the wandering season. The madness season happened only a little while afterwards, and Warlord Varishi, Emperor Varishi, the first emperor, started Sanze then. She founded the empire here on land that everyone feared, and built a city around the thing they were all afraid of. That actually helped keep Orogenes safe in those early years. And after the empire was more established, somewhere between the season of teeth and the breathless season, the fulcrum was founded on this site, on purpose, on top of the thing they were all afraid of. But what Damaya trails off, understanding at last. The histories didn't say what they were afraid of. Precisely, and I think it's in there. Why are only leaders supposed to know this? I don't know, that's why I'm here, so are you coming in with me or not? So, they're walking in, and it's pitch black, and Binoff, who is walking in really fast, Damaya has to, grab her and stop her, because she can sense that there is a huge depression in the ground in front of them. And we find out that it is actually a hexagon shape, this pit. It's basically the shape of a crystal, of one of the floating, what are they called? As if one of them came to Earth and smashed into the ground like a meteor, and then was lifted back out again. This is such a bizarre revelation. It's a huge tapering pit with flat-sided walls and neat, precise edges. 6 of them cut as finely as one cuts a diamond. Evil Earth, Damaya whispers as she edges forward along the walkway to where the yellow lights lime the shape of the pit. Yeah, says Binoff, sounding equally awed. It is stories deep, this pit, and steep. If she fell in, she would roll down its slopes and probably break every bone in her body at the bottom. But the shape of it nags at her because it is faceted, tapering to a point at the very bottom. No one digs a pit in that shape. Why would they? It would be almost impossible to get out of, even with a ladder that could reach so far. But then no one has dug this pit. She can sense that. Something monstrously heavy punched this pit into the earth and sat in the depression long enough to make all the rock and soil beneath it solidify into these smooth, neat plains. Then whatever it was lifted away, clean as a buttered roll from a pan, leaving nothing but the shape of itself behind. But wait. The walls of the pit are not wholly smooth. Damaya crouches for a closer look while beside her, Binoff just stares. Along every smooth slope she can see thin, barely visible, sharp objects. Needles? They push up through fine cracks in the smooth walls, jagged and random, like plant roots. The needles are made of iron. Damaya can smell the rust in the air. Scratch her earlier guess. If she fell into this pit, she would be shredded long before she ever hit the bottom. So this is where this woman reveals herself, that she's there, one of the guardians. I don't know what to make of all of these things that are sticking out. I'm not even going to try and guess that. But this woman comes forward, tall and broad and bronze, pretty in a carved sort of way, with ash-blow hair shorn into a bristly cap. She feels older than Shafa, though this is difficult to tell. Her skin is unmarked, her honey-colored eyes undented by crow's feet. She just feels heavier in presence, and her smile is the same unnerving combination of peaceable and menacing as that of every guardian Damaya has ever seen. And this woman tells her that Shafa will be disappointed, and Binoff tries to stand up for her. I brought her here. I ordered her to come. She didn't even know about the door in this place until I told her. And Binoff has to explain who she is. I had a question that required an answer. The guardian stops, cocking her head and blinking as her smile momentarily fades. Leadership Yemenis. Then she beams. How lovely! So young, and already you have a calm name. You are quite welcome among us, Binoff leader. If you had but told us you were coming, we would have shown you what you wanted to see. Binoff flinches minutely at the rebuke. I had a wish to see it for myself, I'm afraid. Perhaps that was not wise, but my parents are likely by now aware that I have come here, so please feel free to speak to them about it. It's a smart thing to do, Damaya is surprised to realize, because before now she had not thought of Binoff as smart, mentioning that others know where she's gone. I shall, says the guardian, and then she smiles at Damaya, which makes her stomach tighten. And I shall speak to your guardian, and we shall all speak together. That would be lovely, yes? Yes, please. So, Binoff is ushered away, and this guardian tells Damaya to stay put. And when this guardian comes back, I'm trying to find the moment where things turn. I can't tell, in other words, whether or not this is completely this other thing talking to Damaya from the start, or if it comes over her mid-conversation. Did you touch any of them? What? In the socket? You saw the extrusions from the socket walls. Weren't you curious? There was one only an arm's length below where you stood. No, I didn't touch any of them. The guardian sits forward and abruptly her smile vanishes. It doesn't fade, and she doesn't frown to replace it. All the expression just stops in her face. So I guess it comes over her. Did it call to you? Did you answer? Something's wrong. Damaya feels this suddenly, instinctively, and the realization dries the words from her mouth. The guardian even sounds different. Her voice is deeper, softer, almost hushed, as if she's saying something she doesn't want the others to hear. What did it say to you? The guardian extends her hand, and even though Damaya puts her hand out immediately in obedient response, she does not want to. She does it anyway, because guardians are to be obeyed. The woman takes Damaya's hand and holds it palm up, her thumb stroking the long crease, the lifeline. You can tell me. Damaya shakes her head in utter confusion. What did what say to me? It's angry. The woman's voice drops lower, going monotonous. And Damaya realizes she's not trying to go unheard anymore. The guardian is talking differently because that's not her voice. Angry and afraid. I hear both gathering, growing, the anger and the fear, readying for the time of return. What? It did what it had to do last time. It seeped through the walls and tainted their pure creation, exploited them before they could exploit it. When the arcane connections were made, it changed those who would control it, chained them, fate to fate. It made them a part of it. It hoped for communication, or it hoped for communion, compromise. Instead, the battle escalated. And this is when, finally, Shafa comes in and stops this woman. I want to go back over this. It did what it had to do last time. It seeped through the walls and tainted their pure creation, exploited them before they could exploit it. When the arcane connections were made, it changed those who would control it, chained them, fate to fate. Is this about what they do to guardians to get them connected to this socket? Is that something to do with it? Because I feel like it seems like this imprint is made from a huge crystal, like one of the, the floating ones, which I would assume means that the Orogenes are going to have a connection to it. But in the last chapter, or the last episode that I covered, we saw that getting an Orogene to connect with one of those things is not common. And the fact that Syenite was able to... Oh, no. Oh. Damaya is Syenite, and she's able to do something that almost nobody can do. Because of this, maybe? But she didn't touch it, did she? Did just be getting this close to it, did that change everything about what she's able to do? Oh, shit. What the fuck? Guys? Ugh. I don't know what to make of this now. It feels like she got like an extra, what's the word? Like she got some kind of level up from being in this cavern with this thing. But all she did was stand near it. She didn't touch anything. And I don't know what this is and what it can do. I'm really, really curious now. Okay. It speaks only to warn now, she continues in a drone. There will be no compromise next time. Shafa sighs a little, then jabs his fingers into the back of Timé's skull. It's not clear at first from Damaya's angle that this is what he's done. She just sees him make a sudden, sharp, violent movement, and then Timé's head jerks forward. She makes a sound so harsh and guttural that it is almost vulgar, and her eyes go wide. Shafa's face is expressionless as he does something, his arm flexing, and that's when the first blood lines wend around Timé's neck, beginning to sink into her tunic and patter into her lap. Her hand on Damaya's relaxes all at once and her face goes slack. That is also when Damaya begins to scream. She keeps screaming as Shafa twists his hand again, nostrils flaring with the effort of whatever he's doing, and the sound of crunching bone and popping tendon is undeniable. Then Shafa lifts his hand, holding something small and indistinct, too covered in gore, between his thumb and forefinger. Timé falls forward then, and now Damaya sees the ruin that was once the base of her skull. Another guardian comes in, looks at Timé, and looks at Shafa and sighs. Unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Shafa offers the blood-covered thing to this man, who cups his hands to receive it carefully. I would like this removed. He nods towards Timé's body. What? I don't even know. I was afraid she'd hurt you worse than this, because you saw something you should not have seen. You are aware guardians are different. There is a procedure. He lets go of her hand for a moment, touches the back of his own skull, beneath the fall of his long black hair. A thing is done to us to make us what we are, an implantation. Sometimes it goes wrong, and must then be removed, as you saw. A guardian's connections with his assigned Orogenes can help to stave off the worst, but Timé had allowed hers to erode. Foolish. A guardian's connections with his assigned Orogenes can help to stave off the worst. Okay, so that means that the guardians need the Orogenes to keep from turning into whatever the fuck Timé just did, right? So they're somehow like dependent on one another, but they do this to themselves. This isn't, an Orogene, you are born an Orogene or not. You are not born a guardian. And I wonder what happens to turn you into one? What gets decided? And this thing, like, because right after he says that, she thinks to herself about how a chilly barn in the Nomadlats, a moment of apparent affection, 2 warm fingers pressed to the base of Damaya's skull. Duty first, he had said then, something that will make me more comfortable. Damaya licks her lips. So when she says an apparent moment of affection, and then she felt the 2 fingers at the base of her skull, he wasn't implanting anything, right? That's just how he connects to her. To make that, so that's what he meant when he said something that will make me more comfortable. So he connected to an Orogene in order to calm whatever was going on in his head because of this implant. Timay had allowed hers to erode. So just not connecting with an Orogene for long enough will just make you become, it seems, a kind of like puppet for this fucking socket. And I don't know that it's the socket. It just feels like that's, but then it wouldn't be because she asked, did it call to you? And I don't feel like it would talk about itself in the third person like that. So she seems to be like channeling somebody. She was someone else, talking as if someone else was here. She kept talking about a socket and it being angry. Father Earth, of course. It is a common delusion. And you're right, Timay wasn't herself any longer. I'm sorry she hurt you. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm so sorry, little one. And there is such genuine regret in his voice, such compassion in his face, that Damaya does what she has not since a cold, dark night in the Nomadlat's barn. She begins to cry. After a moment, Shafa gets up and comes around the table and picks her up, sitting in the chair and letting her curl up in his lap to weep on his shoulder. There is an order to life in the fulcrum, and it is this. If one has not displeased them, the guardians are the closest thing to safety a Raga will ever have. So Damaya cries for a long time, not just because of what she's seen tonight. She cries because she has been inexpressibly lonely. And Shafa, well, Shafa loves her in his tender and terrifying way. She does not pay attention to the bloody print his right hand leaves on her hip, or the press of his fingers strong enough to kill, against the base of her skull. Such things are irrelevant in the grand scale. When the storm of weeping subsides, Shafa strokes her back with his clean hand. How are you feeling, Damaya? I need you to do something for me. I'm going to take you to one of the crucibles, and there you will face the first ring test. I need you to pass it for me. I need you to live, Damaya. Shafa touches her forehead to his own. My compassionate one. My life is so full of death. Please pass this test for me. There are so many things she wants to know. What Timay meant. What will happen to Binoff? What is the socket? Why was it hidden? What happened to Crack last year? Why Shafa is even giving her this much of a chance? But there is an order to life in the fulcrum, and her place within it is not to question the guardian's will. So she finally tells him that she's going to take the test, and that she has picked a name, and picks Syenite. And he likes it, and says it forms at the edge of a tectonic plate. With heat and pressure, it does not degrade, but instead grows stronger. He does understand. She bites her lip and feels fresh tears threaten. It isn't right that she loves him, but many things in the world are not right. So she fights off the tears and makes her decision. Crying is weakness. Crying was the thing Damaya did. Syenite will be stronger. I'll do it, Syenite says, softly. I'll pass the test for you, Shafa. I promise. My good girl, Shafa says and smiles, holding her close. Guys, I don't know what is going on here. And I'm really interested in what metaphor she's making with the Guardians needing contact with the Orogenes in order to find some relief from, like, getting their mind taken over, essentially. I don't really know if that's supposed to be a metaphor for something, but it feels like it is, and I'm just not entirely sure what. But yeah, that's just, there's so much information there. All right, so that's chapter 17. Chapter 18, we go back to Esun's POV, our POV, and this is when we are getting led through this seemingly abandoned town, and we get brought to a spot where there are two guards standing by that are seemingly the kind of guards that you would want at the gates of a community rather than like inside at this house, which gets our attention right away. And you get led through, and this Ika is a weird moment. The blonde woman speaks quietly with one of the guards. This emphasizes even more how tiny she is, a foot shorter and probably 100 pounds lighter than the smallest of them. The Damaya had ash blow hair. Are guardians stone eaters? Is that? Not necessarily, right? Because what's-his-face has black hair. I don't know if all stone eaters have ash blow hair. Curious. I'm just so... Okay, sorry. I'm just thinking about that now because there are a couple of... I mean, we've got the little kid here. Ika takes you into the house from which she and her companions emerged. There's little furniture inside, and the walls are bare. Turning, you see Ika watching you. Your work? No, this and other hidden entrances have been around for centuries, long before me. This world has passed through many hands down the seasons. Not all of them were quite as stupid as ours about the usefulness of Orogenes. We aren't stupid about it now, you say. Everyone understands perfectly well how to use us. Oh, Ika grimaces pityingly. Fulcrum trained? The ones who survive it always seem to sound like you. You wonder how many Fulcrum trained Orogenes this woman has met. Yes. Well, now you'll see how much more we're capable of when we're willing. And Ika gestures towards a wide opening in the wall a few feet beyond her, which you hadn't noticed in your fascination with the cellar's construction. A faint draft wafts into the cellar from beyond it. There's also 3 people loitering at the mouth of the opening, watching you with varied expressions of hostility, wariness, and amusement. They're not carrying any weapons. Those are propped against the wall nearby. And they're not conspicuous about it. But you realize these are the gate guards this comm should have had, for the gate this comm doesn't have. Here, in this cellar. So, this is when they get led downstairs. They are taken down this tunnel that seems like an abandoned mine shaft because there's like tracks in the ground for carts to roll. But they're really, really old tracks. Like they would not work anymore. And it's clear like how, like, not just because of the tracks being so old that they don't work, but there's like, torch brackets in the walls, and there are electric lights in them now, but it seems pretty clear they started off as torch brackets. So this is some shit that's been around a long time. I told you there were mines in the area. That's how they found these back in the day. Someone cracked a wall they shouldn't have and blundered into a whole warren of tunnels no one knew were there. Oh, right. This is the thing. After a time, you notice belatedly that the red-haired stone eater is gone. She didn't follow you down into the shaft. Ika doesn't seem to notice, so you touch her arm. Where's your friend? Oh, that one. Moving the way we do is hard for them, so they've got their own ways of getting about, including ways I would never have guessed. She glances at Hoa, who's come down the steps with you. He looks back at her coldly, and she breathes out a laugh. Interesting. So I'm assuming when she says that she means that her Stone Eater friend is walking through the stone the way that they do, as if it's like water, basically. And she says interesting about this boy because of the fact that he's not choosing to travel that way, that he's staying with them, which I'm not really sure, like, if that's supposed to be a demonstration of his loyalty to us. But the fact that he looks at her coldly makes me feel like either he doesn't trust her, or he knows what this is all about and he's not excited about it, or I'm not sure what. But there's an implication there that interests me. So they go further and further down, and this is the point where we start to get a little nervous about it, because being underground when earthquakes are a thing is like one of the most dangerous places to be. And they're talking about the shake from the beginning of the book. We're calling it the Yemenis Rifting, since nobody's come up with a better name yet. And that was the worst the world's seen in an age. I don't think I'm exaggerating by saying so. But of course, the tunnels didn't collapse because I was here. I didn't let them. You say, you won't always be around. When I'm not, someone else will do it. She shrugs. Like I said, there's a lot of us here now. Then she, and this is really, really weird to me. How are you doing it? Luring Orogenes here. Luring? It's not that sinister. It's hard to describe. There's a thing I do, like... She falls silent, and all at once you stumble while you're walking. There's no obstruction on the floor. It's just suddenly difficult to walk in a straight line, as if the floor has developed an invisible downward slope towards Ika. You stop and glare at her. How are you doing that? I don't know. It's just something I tried a few years ago, and not too long after I started doing it, a man came to town and said he'd felt me from miles away. Then 2 kids showed up. They didn't even realize what they were reacting to. Then another man. I've kept doing it since. Only Ragas feel it. And them, I realized later. And she glances at Hoa. About that, Tonki blurts. Earth fires and rust buckets. You ask too many questions. This comes from the blonde woman, who shakes her head and gestures for all of you to keep walking. Who just, like, apparently materialized out of the wall. So this is when we first see the thing. I love this. There's a place where the tunnel opens out and becomes a wide ledge with a metal railing for safety. A scenic viewpoint, because some engineer or innovator understood exactly how newcomers would react. You do exactly as that long-ago designer intended. You stare in open-mouthed, abject wonder. It's a geode. You can sense that the way the rock around you abruptly changes to something else. The pebble in the stream, the warp in the weft, countless eons ago a bubble formed in a flow of molten mineral within Father Earth. Within that pocket, nurtured by incomprehensible pressures and bathed in water and fire, crystals grew. This one's the size of a city, which is probably why someone built a city in this one. You stand before a vast vaulted cavern that is full of glowing crystal shafts the size of tree trunks. Big tree trunks. Or buildings. Big buildings. They jut forth from the walls in an utterly haphazard jumble. Different lengths, different circumferences, some white and translucent, a few smoky or tinged with purple, some are stubby, their pointed tips ending only a few feet away from the walls that grew them. But many stretch from one side of the vast cavern into the indistinct distance. They form struts and roads too steep to climb, going in directions that make no sense. It's as if someone found an architect, made her build a city out of the most beautiful materials available, then threw all those buildings into a box and jumbled them up for laughs. And they're definitely living in it. As you stare, you notice narrow rope bridges and wooden platforms everywhere. There are dangling lines strung with electric lanterns, ropes, and pulleys carrying small lifts from one platform to another. In the distance, a man walks down a wooden stairway built around a titanic slanted column of white. 2 children play in the ground far below, in between stubby crystals the size of houses. Actually, some of the crystals are houses. They have holes cut in them, doors and windows. You can see people moving around inside some of them. Smoke curls from chimney holes cut in pointed crystal tips. Evil-eating earth, you whisper. Ika stands there with pride. We didn't do most of this, she admits. The recent additions, the newer bridges, yes, but the shaft hollowing had already been done. We don't know how they managed it without shattering the crystals. The walkways that are made of metal, it's the same stuff as the steps in the tunnels we just passed through. The engineers have no idea how it's made. Metallurists and alchemists have orgasms when they see it. There are mechanisms up there that pump bad air into a layer of porous earth that filters and disperses it back to the surface. Other pumps bring in good air. Like, this whole thing is just so bananas. Geodes are unstable once their shells are breached. Even Tonki sounds floored. It doesn't make sense to even think of building inside one. And why are the crystals glowing? She's right. They are. No idea, but the people who built this wanted it to last, even through a shake, so they did things to the geode to make sure that would happen. And it did. But they didn't. When people from Kostrima found this, it was full of skeletons, some so old they turned to dust as soon as we touched them. And our character, Asun, tries to say something about how, like, oh, really, you're going ahead and living in the exact place that a bunch of people were mysteriously killed? That does not seem like a good idea. And Ika is basically like, well, yeah, I mean, you aren't the first person to say that, first person to worry about that. It's definitely been a source of debate amongst us whether or not that this is an actual good idea. But we're trying to figure out a lot of the problems, and some of them we have figured out, you know, like there's been problems like making sure that we have enough food down here, and the air had been bad at one time, so they did wind up suffocating. Like, there's been a bunch of different things that went very, very wrong. But we're starting to finally like figure it all out. They passed down stories about this place, but still no one wanted to live here until my great-grandmother realized why the mechanisms didn't work. Until she got them working, just by walking through that entrance. Worked for me too when I first came down here. You stop. Everyone goes on without you for a moment. Hoa is the first to notice that you're not following. He turns and looks at you. There's something guarded in his expression that was not there before, you notice distantly, through horror and wonder. Later, when you've had time to get past this, you and he will have to talk. Yeah, you will! I am dying to know what the fuck is going on with Hoa. But it turns out the mechanisms run on Orogenes. So you need an origin here for this whole community to even function, which is really interesting. I don't really know how many more of these there are. If that is supposed to be what was in, like, the spot that Damaya, I'll call her that when she's the child POV, that Damaya discovered, was that where a city had been? And I don't feel like it seems as big as this one, though. I don't know. But I wonder if there are other pockets like this. That would, though, this is a geode that's like grown out of the ground. That was something that like came and hit Earth. Those aren't the same thing. So yeah. Anyway, she says, this is what we're trying to do in Kostrima. Survive. Same as anyone. We might all die doing it, but that will happen anyway. It's a season. Can we leave? What the rust do you mean, can we leave? We barely had time to explore. Tonki begins looking angry, then abruptly she realizes what you mean. Her sallow face grows more so. Oh. Ika's smile is sharp as a diamond. Well, you're not stupid, that's good. Come on, we've got some people to meet. She beckons for you to follow again, resuming her walking down the slope, and she does not answer your question. So, I'm going to read this little end section and then wrap. In actual practice, the Sesapine, paired organs located at the base of the brainstem, have been found to be sensitive to far more than local seismic movements and atmospheric pressure. In tests, reactions have been observed to the presence of predators, to others' emotions, to distant extremes of heat or cold, and to the movements of celestial objects. The mechanisms of these reactions cannot be determined. That's interesting. The movements of celestial objects. What does... I mean, we know that there's no moon here, right? But what about these floating dailies? Yeah. I'm very curious about these Cassipinae. Like, only Orogenes have them? I feel like whatever the Guardians get done, it like implants a fake Cassipinae. Does that make sense? Like a, what do you call it? Synthetic one? Yeah, I don't know. But this was a lot of info, guys. I was not expecting this. There's just so much to theorize about now. And it's weird because like I look and I'm pretty far into the book at this point. But I feel like I'm just getting information that one would expect at the beginning of a story of this type. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just really there's a lot left, right? How many books are there in this series? Are there just 3? Is it a trilogy? This is 5th season. Then there's like Stone Breakers or something. I don't know. Season of Stone. I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking about, though. There are other ones. I just don't want to look them up because of spoilers, because I inevitably wind up spoiling myself even when I think that it's innocuous. But yeah, this was really interesting. So thank you very much to Megan Tolentino for commissioning this episode. Super duper appreciate getting back to this book because I've been low key just like, oh my God, I want to read more. What happened? And I know shit happens. Like especially if one person has been responsible for continually commissioning almost the entire book or TV series or something. And then all of a sudden they drop off the face of Earth. A lot of times there's, it's a combination of, you run out of money because Christmas came. I know a lot of people were dealing with Christmas dip, but also like other people who have gotten used to listening are also taking for granted that one person's going to continue to book it all. And it doesn't even occur to them until it's gone on quite a while that maybe that person is not going to come back. And maybe I need to pick this up if I want to keep listening to it. So Megan posted in the group and was just like, hey, can I commission the next one of those? Because I'll do that. And I was just like, yay! Because I totally understand if you're not able to make a commission, guys. Like if you are, nobody knows what that's like better than me. But, my little voice in my head is just like, but what happens? But what happens next? But don't you want to know what happens? Yes, I do, brain. Shut up. So yeah, this is really interesting so far. What a crazy mythology she set up. I hope that you guys all are enjoying my coverage of this. Thank you again to Megan. Thank you to Ashlyn, who started this whole series off for me. And I hope to see you all soon again with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.